Summary of the previous session. Humans are motivated by lust and aggression. In other way, available resources are scarce or limited. Nature of lust and aggression of human leads to material orientation of the human. Lust and aggression of human, scarcity of the resources and material orientation of the human leads to develop selfishness of the individual. Selfishness of individual leads to the market orientation. Outcomes of Western economy. Majority of the world population remains poor. Growing gap between rich and poor. Increasing environmental pollution. Developing drug market and new form of slave trade. Increasing corruptions. Stock markets are running as global casinos. Spiritual teaching. There are no independent things. Humans are viewed as part of a large whole. Holistic view. Universe consists of combined patterns of energy. If we need to know a thing, we have to know the whole from which they originate. We are more like intangible. Modern knowledge economy. Not consider the material possession. Consider domain of mind or creativity. Business strategies focus less on things and more on how to manage them. Innovation is based on intellectual capital. Conclusion. Competition and consumption have bypassed spiritual and moral issues. Economists have overlooked that the more we consume, the happier we are. Market will bring us all the things that we want. Our satisfaction is obtained by the senses. Consuming material goods leads sensual experiences. This feeds an emotion of sensual desire. At the same time, competitors are longing after or desire the same things on the limited resources. Hence, we experience fear, the fear of losing out, the fear that our desire will not be satisfied. Mechanism of expanding capitalism is based by two strong emotions: desire and fear. Buddhist Economics Session 2. Traditional economics and Buddhist economics. Traditional economics concentrates on self-interest. The Buddhist view challenges it by changing the nature of self to anatta or no self. Anatta imagines that all things perceived by one's senses are not actually I or mine, and therefore, human must detach themselves from this feeling. Buddhist economists believe that the self-interest-based opportunistic approach has always failed to practice the ethics. According to Buddhist economists, generosity is a viable economic model because human beings tend to reciprocate to feelings, either positively or negatively, by giving back more than what is given to them. Traditional economists emphasize importance to maximizing profits and individual gains. Buddhist economics minimize suffering or losses for all living and non-living things. Studies conducted by them have shown that human beings show greater sensitivity to loss than to gains, and therefore people should concentrate more on reducing the former. There is a difference with respect to the concept of desire. Traditional economist encourages material wealth and desire. In Buddhist economics, importance is given to simplify one's desire. Overall well-being decreases if people pursue meaningless desires. Many economists advocate maximizing markets to a point of saturation. Buddhist economists aim at minimizing violence. Traditional economics do not take into consideration primordial stakeholders like future generations and the natural world because their vote is not considered relevant in terms of purchasing power. They think that other stakeholders such as poor and marginalized people are underrepresented because of their inadequate purchasing power and preference is given to the strongest stakeholders. Buddhist economists advocate ahimsa or non-violence. Ahimsa prevents doing anything that directly causes suffering to oneself or others and urges to find solutions in a participative way. Western economists try to maximize instrumental use where the value of any entity is determined by its marginal contribution to the production output. Buddhist economists feel that the real value of an entity is neither realized nor given importance to. They try to reduce instrumental use and form caring organizations which will be rewarded in terms of trust among the management, co-workers and employees. Western economists tend to believe that bigger is better and more is more. Buddhist economists believe that small is beautiful and less is more. Western economists view bigness is impersonal. Bigness is insensitive. Bigness has lust to power. Buddhist economists view smallness is free. Smallness is efficient. Smallness is creative. Smallness is enjoyable. Smallness is enduring. According to the Western economics and the Buddhist economics, Western economics consist of maximize profit, maximize desires, maximize market, maximize instrumental use, maximize self-interest. Bigger is better and more is more. Buddhist economics consists of minimize suffering against to the maximizing profit, minimize desires against to the maximizing desires, minimize violence against to the maximize market, minimize instrumental use against to the maximizing instrumental use, minimize self-interest against to the maximizing self-interest. Small is beautiful against to the bigger is better. Less is more against to the more is more. Principles of Buddhist economics. Minimizing suffering. The underlying principle of the Buddhist economics is to minimize suffering of all sentient beings, including non-human beings. From the Buddhist viewpoint, a project is worthy to be undertaken if it can reduce the suffering of all those who are affected. Any change in economic activity systems that reduces suffering should be welcomed. The suffering-minimizing principles can be formulated to reveal that the goal of economic activities is not to produce gains but to decrease losses. Simplifying desires. Modern economics cultivates desires. People are encouraged to develop new desires for things to acquire and for activities to do. But psychological research shows that materialistic value orientation undermines well-beings. People who are highly focused on materialistic values have lower personal well-being and psychological health than those who believe that materialistic pursuits are relatively unimportant. Study sample, people ranging from the wealthy to the poor, from teenagers to the elderly and from Australians to South Koreans. According to the study, strong materialistic values are associated with pervasive undermining of people's well-being, from low life satisfaction and happiness, more depression and anxiety, more physical problems such as headaches, personality disorders, narcissism and antisocial behavior. Buddhist strategy is just the opposite of the Western one. It suggests not to multiply but to simplify our desires. Minimum material comfort, which includes enough food, clothing, shelter and medicine. It is wise to try to reduce one's desires. Practicing non-violence. Paul Samuelson, Economics textbook, selected the motto, "Even a parrot can become an economist." Well, what he should learn is only two words: supply and demand. Market is a powerful institution. It can provide goods and services in a flexible and productive way, but it has its own limitations. Limitations of the market comes from non-represented stakeholders, underrepresented stakeholders, myopic stakeholders. Primordial stakeholders such as nature and future generations are simply not represented in the market because they do not have a vote, in terms of purchasing power. They can't represent their interest in the language of supply and demands. Poor and marginalized people are underrepresented because they do not have enough purchasing power to signal their preferences in the market. Stakeholders who are well represented in the market, they have enough purchasing power, often behavior on a myopic way. They heavily discount values of the products and services in the space and the time. Market price usually reflect the values of the strongest stakeholders and favor preferences for them. Non-violence, Ahimsa, is the main guiding principles of Buddhism for solving social problems. It is requested that an act does not cause harm to the doer or the receivers. A good example is community economy model. Community economy model. Communities of producers and consumers are formed to meet both their needs at the lowest cost and reduced risk by a long-term arrangement. Use local resources to meet the needs of local people rather than the wants of markets for away. World prices do not determine what will be produced, and the key production processes need to be run entirely without inputs from the world system. This is based on self-reliance that is closely linked to ecological sustainability. Practice living within limits. Achieving ecological sustainability and non-violence, organizational structures should be altered with appropriate ways. This means de-emphasizing profit maximization and market systems and introduce small-scale, locally adaptable, culturally diverse ways of engaging in substantive economic activity. Genuine care. In modern Western economics, the value of an entity is determined by its marginal contribution to the production output. A project is considered worthy of undertaking if and only if its discounted cash flow is positive. Buddhist economics proposes to abandon this kind of calculative thinking. It urges taking genuine care of all the beings affected by one's action. Caring organizations are rewarded for the higher costs of their socially responsible behavior by their ability to form commitments among owners, managers and employees and to establish trust relationships with customers and subcontractors. Robert Frank developed 5 distinct types of cases when socially responsible organizations are rewarded for the higher cost of caring. Opportunistic behavior can be avoided between owners and managers. Getting moral satisfaction, employees are ready to work more for lower salaries. High-quality new employees can be recruited. Customers' loyalty can be gained. The trust of subcontractors can be established. In modern Western economics there is only a little place for ethics. The Western economic man is allowed to consider the interest of others only if it serves his or her own interest. Buddhist economics encourages generosity in business and social life. It usually works because people tend to reply what they get and often they give back more in value than to the doer originally gave to them. Key points of Buddhist economics. Buddhist economics is a middle way of development, aiming to achieve maximum well-being with minimum consumption. Buddhist economics serves to purify human character through challenging and meaningful labor, as opposed to a focus on maximizing production and consumption. Promotes small-scale and localized economies as the way to alleviate the world of the problems created by a system devoid of moral values. Wealth should be attained and maintained through the principle of right livelihood and the consideration of generosity. Generosity leads to greater wealth and social status in the future. The country's ultimate aim should be to promote the spiritual improvement of a population. Income redistribution is one way of reducing poverty which restricts spiritual growth. Dharmic action, such as generosity and other merits, supporting redistribution of wealth lead to an inevitable increase in the material wealth of the community. At the same time, regulation of the market is limited to activities which do not abide by right livelihood, no arms, drugs and so on. Buddhism is a practice of being, not a philosophy of becoming. It is real-time, not reactively rational, thus natural development is the key.